So, how can streaming recover from several of the losses it's faced from 2023 and prior? We'll talk about it more in just a second here. So, streaming services have all been struggling to some degree to retain subscribers and retain audience attention. And a lot of that has to do with a combination of elements. One is the price point. Number two is a lack of interesting new content that has broad appeal. And another is the format itself is just kind of dull and uninspired. There's not a whole lot to it compared to what broadcast television had in its heyday. You know, broadcast television in its heyday had really good commercials, bumpers, promos, programs in between programs, special little programs during commercial breaks that you could watch. That's what Disney Channel used to have. It was great. Disney Channel back in the day was spectacular from about 1997 till about, I want to say 2013, 2014, maybe a little later. Disney Channel was awesome. Now, I only watched from about 98 till, I want to say 2009 or so, or 2010. But it was a great channel because they were promo breaks. They weren't commercial breaks, the way Disney is set up. But there was so much interesting stuff in between the programs. The presentation of programs, when they were showing a Walt Disney feature picture, it was under the Magical World of Disney label. And sometimes, even before the early 2000s, Magical World of Disney was its own sort of block of movies. And it was a great presentation. Just go look up the Magical World of Disney intro, and then look up ABC's Wonderful World of Disney intro, which they still do. It's all about the presentation. You know, and streaming doesn't have any of that. Streaming doesn't have that sort of presentation because that only comes with a broadcast format. So once you've sacrificed that, you've just got your program. You've got no hype leading up to the program. Some people might not think that that's important, but it is important to get your audience excited for what they're about to watch. That's why movie theaters used to be so awesome, is because of all the stuff that happened before the movie and then finally the main event. It's an experience, and streaming doesn't have anything to really hype people up in that manner. So how can streaming recover from these losses? Well, the first thing they need to do is set a fixed price point and stay with it. I would say the most reasonable would be about $15 a month. And don't go up from there unless you are offering something really spectacular. If you're going to go to $20 or $30 a month, it had better be worth people's time. The only time I could see it being worth paying that is if they add actual television networks onto the service. That's the only other way. And that's something I think they should do. That's another point that I think can help streaming services, if they actually add television services to these streaming services. You add television networks, then you get the combination of everything you want on demand and a linear broadcast experience for those of us who still prefer that. Right now, what you have is basically your on-demand stuff and your free TV, your fast TV on one app, which is convenient, but I want real television networks. I want FXX so I can watch The Simpsons and Bob's Burgers and Family Guy and Futurama and whatever else. Or I want the ability to be able to watch all of these different channels that have programming that I know is on that I watch on those channels. Sometimes I just want to watch those programs as they're presented to me in a broadcast format. That's just relaxing to me. It's a good way to unwind and not have to worry about scrolling through and being indecisive. Now, granted, you can be indecisive with television just by flipping through channels, but I'd rather do that than flip through programs. It's a different experience, guys. It just is. So, fixed price point, allowing people to have actual network television channels on streaming. And then another point I would think would be stop with the first-party services. You know, instead of Disney, Paramount, Warner Brothers Discovery, and NBC Universal having their own services, go to third parties. Just put all your content on third parties, which they are starting to do, by the way, but they're doing it wrong. What they're doing is they're basically adding a tab to these third-party services, and you have to pay a couple dollars extra. Wrong. Don't do it that way. That is the worst way to approach that sort of strategy. Just add on those tabs and don't charge extra. In this economy, you can't nickel and dime people. They won't accept it. And these companies are too greedy and too out to lunch to understand this concept. They don't understand that the consumer is trying to save and get the most for their initial subscription fee. You got to give them as much as possible for as little as possible if you want to keep them as a customer. I don't understand how these companies don't get this. They seem to think that we are gullible enough, because so many people do pay for these services regardless, that they can just keep charging whatever they want. They can't. As the economy gets worse, people have to start cutting costs. And if a streaming service is being paid for monthly and it's expensive in the double digits, they're going to have to see whether it's justifiable or not. If it's not, then they will cut it. And a lot of these services are only really useful for older content, which leads me into my next point. They need good new content. And that's probably a more advanced discussion than I have time for in this video. But the gist of it is, they need better new content. They need new content that is inspired by genres that have succeeded before. They need more sitcoms. They need more game shows. They need more animated series. Stop canceling animated series. Netflix and Max, they've both been canceling animated series left, right, and center. Original animated series. You can't do that. Both for kids and adults, animation is appealing, and you can have multiple genres. Japan has proven this with anime. That's why anime has taken off, and they don't understand anime. They've not even tried to understand anime or its success. They haven't even tried to. The most they do is they try to loosely mimic its look. That's where you get crap like My Adventures with Superman, which I think is dog crap. I hate that show. Anyways, what they need to understand is that the medium of animation can be used for multiple genres, for multiple age groups, and they need to take advantage of that and have really good ideas for that. And then when it comes to live action content, just have enough variety and quality for people to keep coming back. Because yes, while there is a lot of classic, timeless media on these services, that's not enough to keep people subscribed. What people want is a combination of old and new, just a one-stop shop for everything, a celebration of everything. But unfortunately, Hollywood is utterly incapable of making anything good that's new, in my opinion. So that's going to be a lot bigger of a hurdle for them to jump. It's going to require a whole lot more change in philosophies in Hollywood that I don't think we'll see for many years, if at all. A lot of people are predicting 2024 onward is going to be the pivot point for Hollywood to pivot away from cultural Marxism and more divisive ideologies and going back to trying to unite people under neutrality. But only time will tell. I can't see into the future. I have no idea. I would love nothing more than for Hollywood to go back to trying to appeal to families and more united demographics, as opposed to going after targeted demographics and isolating them. And you can go after targeted demographics and families together. You know, it's funny because what television networks used to do in the early 2000s was they would have, many of them would have cartoons in the afternoons for kids, and then everything else for adults throughout the rest of the day and into the evening. They would have multiple blocks of programming for multiple different targeted demographics. They don't do that anymore. Entire channels are devoted to entire demographics now. And I think that that's part of what killed broadcast television in the minds of many people, between that and the price. You go to a network and it's just the same thing again and again and again. In some cases, literally. The Teen Nick channel is all Henry Danger. I was looking at the broadcast schedule today. It is one show all day. They might as well rename it to that. It might as well be a fast TV network. Whereas back in the day, they used to have more classical programming, live action Nickelodeon sitcoms from the late 90s, early 2000s. And then they had a block of 90s television. The 90s are all that, which became the Splat. And then eventually, I think it was Nick Rewind. And now all of that stuff is over on Pluto TV, so they won't even bother with it. But still, and I heard somebody say somewhere, and I can't corroborate this, so I don't know if it's true, but I heard somebody say that Paramount's strategy is they really don't want to have to rely on older content. They want to look for just new stuff. And as much as I'm advocating for new things, you have to be careful with going with just new and ignoring the old. People will take notice of that, and if your new stuff doesn't succeed, that's money down the drain. You have to have a balanced strategy. And you have to understand what people want. These services and these companies don't actually survey people, to my understanding. They don't actually go out and see what it is that people want. They do their own internal studies and polling, and then they come to their own conclusions. They don't hardly do anything meaningfully externally in terms of data gathering and asking people, what the heck do you actually want? Which is why I picture the boardrooms in most of these Hollywood studios and network buildings. They're all blindfolded, throwing darts at a board and seeing what sticks. It's very dumb, because there's a lot of money involved in the production of these shows and movies. You have to understand what it is that people want. You can't just look at the numbers, because certain stuff is a trend and certain things are lasting. There's a reason people still watch The Office. There's a reason The Office was topping the charts on Netflix for almost the entire duration that it was on there. It's a timeless show to many people. Now, I'm sort of indifferent to The Office myself. I don't think it's terrible, but I don't think it's the greatest show ever made. But there is no denying that that show carried Netflix, because people would just binge watch it because of how good it was. You want a show like that again? You want several shows like that again? You got to take risks. You got to invest in quality. And you got to bring on people who can make those types of concepts into reality if you know that they work. And you got to let them be free to actually write the episodes that they need to write instead of constantly interfering. And that's something that Hollywood just cannot do. So there's a lot of stuff that they can do to recover from the losses that they've had, because right now, the only thing really keeping streaming services alive is old content, as far as I'm concerned, and the occasional breakout news show, which Netflix tends to rely on every once in a great while. But then they cancel a whole bunch of other great new shows that don't do as well as the others. They don't give them time to sink in. Some of them are just outright terrible. Obviously, we have stuff on Max like Velma, which should have never have seen the light of day. That was one of the most offensive things I've ever seen a streaming service do. No, actually, scratch that. The most offensive thing I've ever seen a streaming service do is Cuties. But that's neither here nor there. People are still trying to forget about that whole debacle. And some people went crying back to Netflix, which is hilarious to me. People say, I'm not going to subscribe to Netflix ever again after this. And then some people went running back because One Piece. Ugh. I don't know. In the long run, I think that streaming will eventually be figured out. I don't think it's a type of service that will go away. I think there are people who want it to disappear. But the only other alternative after that is to go back to a network format, and people don't want to do that. As much as I love network television, plenty of other people have already moved on from that format. They just want to consume on-demand content, and fair enough. I think the best possible format is a combination of broadcast and on-demand. And I think that broadcast would have been strengthened had they strengthened their on-demand library once Netflix took off. But they didn't. And they still won't. And so now they're being left in the dust. Or rather, they're just focusing on their streaming services and leaving the networks to just wallow in mediocrity, whereas they used to be an experience worth tuning in for. Like I said, old Disney Channel, old Nickelodeon, old Cartoon Network, old TBS, old TNT, old AMC, all these old networks and more. ABC Family before they renamed it to freaking Freeform, which is a far worse name. But they did that because they wanted to get away from just family content, even though the majority of stuff on there now is Disney movies. Go figure. All these networks used to not only have some form of variety, but they were an experience, and they were always promoting something fun and exciting that was to come. They hardly do that anymore. The only networks that do that stuff are the digital subchannels, MeTV, Antenna TV, Laugh. I've mentioned these dozens and dozens of times before. The digital subchannels are potentially the future of network television because they've gone back to the old format. Freaking MeTV has brought back Saturday morning cartoons, It has got the Letter Network seriously considering bringing back Saturday morning cartoons. I've heard rumors for a while now that they're considering it because MeTV has had so much success. Both kids and adults tuning in Saturday mornings to watch cartoons. It's currently Saturday morning right now. It's 2 in the morning, so I've only got a couple hours to sleep. Then hopefully I'm going to wake up and watch some Looney Tunes. I watched them this morning because they have early morning cartoons. Tune in with me on MeTV. Combination of Warner Brothers cartoons and some of the ones from MGM and Columbia and, back in the golden age. It's really cool stuff. And then they have fun stuff in between. Really fun stuff in between. They have the cartoon curator, Bill and Toonie the Tuna. Just fun in between program bumpers. That's what I like about TV. The stuff in between the shows as much as the program. The stuff that gets me excited about watching the program and also curious about what they're doing in between the programs. You don't get that with streaming, and because you don't get that in streaming, you either have to add it when you add ads, or you have to come up with some other draw. If they're going to add ads, which let's face it, we know they're going to do. I already made the video talking about how Prime Video is doing it, and all these other services are doing it. Why not add bumpers and promos? And why not add linear channels, for crying out loud? Just have an option for linear broadcast, a serious linear broadcast. So that way these network people can keep their jobs. I'd hate to see the entire infrastructure and all of the linear networks just disappear because of streaming. I don't want to see that happen. The day that happens, you'll see me making a video on it, and it will be a sad day. I'll probably go exclusively to Fast TV at that point. Who knows, maybe the linear networks will go on to Fast TV. It seems like a pipe dream because Fast TV is free, so they'd be losing some money. But people already aren't subscribing to a lot of these linear services. I checked, I think Philo TV had 800,000 subscribers. Most of them have 700 to 800,000 subscribers at max. Little less than 1 million. So while there is still sizable audiences who want to watch linear television, the number is shrinking massively. And if they want to get those numbers up, they need to have more programming and more appeal. They need to go back to the way the networks used to be. And they also need accessibility and better pricing options. While the internet TV broadcasts are a lot cheaper than physical cable and satellite, not a lot of people are signing up because most of these are still $75, $80 a month. And there's not a whole lot there outside of here you have this cornucopia of networks that don't really have anything on them. The only networks that are consistently putting out new content, it seems, are the Discovery networks. The rest of them are just showing endless old content, or older content, sometimes as old as the early 2000s and 90s and earlier, but a lot of stuff from the 2010s. There were a lot of sitcoms that came out in the 2010s that just flew under the radar. Because nobody knew about them, I think. I think that's part of the problem. And then when people watched them, they were like, People were burned out by that time. But I think hopefully the return of the sitcom is somewhere around the corner. At least that's what I'm hoping for. There's a new sitcom that premiered on NBC that I want to check out. I forget what it's called. But it premiered just before Christmas, I believe. And I want to check it out. I want to see what it's all about because I'm mildly curious. I don't expect it to be even remotely good. But I really like that format, and it's family centered. It seems, or it's about a family. I don't know if it's more. They've said it's a little bit like Modern Family meets a classical sitcom, and I thought, that's innovative. That could be interesting. That could be good if it's well written, if it's well performed, if it doesn't get too ideological. It could be fun. So I'm willing to check it out, but I mean, honestly, who knows? That's the problem is, can they produce the type of content that they used to? They don't want to look back. They want to look forward. And unfortunately, there is no path forward until you look back and you recognize what people liked to begin with. They got to take risks. And they got to be willing to promote stuff, too. In order for streaming to succeed, I think as an overall, it needs to be worth the money. It's not worth the money right now, and there's just far too many of them. Even though they're trying to combine, they're still charging people absurd amounts. Get a Paramount Plus tab on Prime Video for $2.99 a month. Oh, and guess what? You also have to pay $2.99 to get rid of ads. They just keep increasing the prices. They're getting back to hundreds of dollars a month. People aren't going to pay that. I'm sorry, Gen Z is not going to pay that. Gen Z did not grow up with television like we did. Only a handful of them did, if any. But the generation below them certainly didn't or isn't growing up with television. They're growing up with freaking TikTok and YouTube, and they might not even have televisions in their houses, depending on if they get game consoles or not. The whole landscape has just changed, and if they want to get people's attention again, they have to make this stuff accessible. That's why I'm really leaning into Fast TV, and I think that they should be leaning into Fast TV. Turns out Disney actually does have Fast TV. I've been saying for a long time, it's baffling that they don't. They sort of do. It's on their ABC app, and they didn't even begin to promote it. Didn't even begin to promote it. They just slapped it on the ABC app and said, there it is. Which shows how incompetently run they are. And there's hardly anything there. They could have an ABC sitcoms channel. They could have Saturday morning cartoons channel. They could have Disney Channel classics, Disney Channel classic movies. They could have all of this stuff on Fast TV. And they would be a leader because they've got so much content from over the years. But they're so obsessed with Disney Plus and making that profitable, and that's just a pipe dream. So it is what it is. I think streaming can recover from its losses, but it's going to require an entire restructuring of streaming from the bottom up. It's going to require combining it with broadcast television and keeping that broadcast experience for those who want it. That consolidation. Because right now it's either one or the other. If you can give people both, that'll be well worth what they're asking for. If you're going to ask for $30 a month, that should get me a bunch of broadcast television channels. It just should. And then for everything else I need, I can just get an antenna for all the digital sub-channels and whatnot. So there are definitely options there for streaming to recover. I don't think it's a dead format. I think the format is here to stay. But I also think that broadcast is here to stay too, for better or worse. And I know that several executives in Hollywood and in entertainment would love nothing more than to just shift everything over to streaming. But broadcast is still an experience that we need to preserve. And Fast TV is proof of that. Fast TV is proof that people still do want a broadcast experience. They just want to watch classical style television. To just say, okay, well, here's the schedule. Okay, I'll tune in for this. I'll tune in for this. There you go. I've heard people try to say that broadcast is outdated, and I've never agreed with that. It's not outdated. It's more accessible than ever now that people can watch stuff on their phones, for crying out loud. You can get any Fast TV service on your phone. You can get most cable and broadcast television service, either internet, cable, or satellite, on your phone. You know, it's not just tied to your TV anymore. People think it's outdated because it's tied to the television. Not true. It's just if you want the biggest and best picture, you watch it on a TV. But it's not tied to a TV. You can have it on a tablet. You can have it on a phone. And I'm telling you something right now. 11-year-old me would have given anything to be able to have broadcast TV in the palm of his hands wherever he went that he could get service. I would have given anything for that. Can you imagine, for those kids who grew up in the late 90s, early 2000s, 90s, 80s, 70s, can you imagine if we could have, and I know some of you had portable TVs, so I know that was a thing, because I had portable TVs, but can you imagine having full-on network television in the palm of your hands? Perfect reception, as long as you get a strong signal, strong service. Wherever you go, you can watch the premiere of your favorite Nickelodeon show, Cartoon Network show, Disney Channel show, any of the letter networks down below, stuff like ABC Family. Can you imagine not having to miss out on those things because you can have them on your phone? That would have been spectacular. Because I'm somebody who, for a lot of their childhood, we moved around a lot. We didn't, and I'm not saying we moved houses. I mean, we barely stayed home until the later years. But in my earlier childhood, we were always going out and doing things during the weeknights and on the weekends. And I would have given anything to be able to take TV with me. I missed out a lot of TV. I had to do a lot of catch up because of all the places we went. And a lot of times I was very bored. I'd play my Game Boy, get bored of that, and want to watch TV and hope that wherever we went had one. Now you don't anymore. So people continuously saying, oh, broadcast TV is outdated. Don't listen to them, because it's not true. It's like radio. It's more accessible than ever now. It's just a question of what people are willing to pay for it. Are people willing to pay $70, $80 a month for it? And unfortunately, a lot of people aren't. Those prices definitely need to come down. They should be at least $40, $50 at maximum. And even that's pushing it for some people. $70, $80 is a lot. But they all have different tiers, so I mean, we'll see what happens over the years, because they are successful services. They've got nearly 1 million subscribers. That's nothing compared to what TV used to be for viewership, but again, the landscape is changing, and what people do have preferences of format. But it is what it is. So, in conclusion, with all the rambling aside, streaming can recover from losses. We'll just have to wait and see what happens. I'll continue to update you guys on major news, on breakthroughs with things like streaming and broadcast television, or if there's any changes between the two. So, there you go. Be sure to leave a comment down below. As always, try to be respectful when doing so. Thank you very much for watching. This has been Super Koopa TV. Remember, Hollywood does not respect you. God bless. Have a good one. Peace.